daun-daun, bibigyan mo kata hindi ka bakaso, ganito ka, tekta ganito.
Welcome. I have Jay Smart here, who says he's not as, should have been his name. But anyway, he's going to be talking about his experiences with mining and also about a mining, I guess it's a history month, a Women's History Month maybe. And I think it's happening in March, early March, and it's about women in mining, which those women just get everywhere, don't they?
Well, even at Moz. And on March 11th, in honor of Women's History Month, Lena has put together a program including several docents that will be scattered about the museum at Moz, and they will speak to women in mining with the visitors, and so it's a time to be out there at the southeast corner. That's where the mining exhibit is. Not sure that I was going to be involved because I'm certainly not a woman, but at the same time, I'll be out there explaining what you're seeing in the mining exhibit. And it was 16 years ago now, and I received a phone call from Larry Polya, and he was one that would say, you know, there wouldn't have been a railroad here in this valley if it hadn't been for mining. And we don't have a mining exhibit. And it was his vision to show the process of hard rock mining for gold. This is some gold ore here that is in a hard rock setting. There's two types of mining for gold. There are placer mining and hard rock mining. Placer mining is where the gold is in the form of nuggets or gold dust and can be retrieved from its gravelly deposit by a pan or a sluice or whatever.
So the placer mining involves water, correct?
Yes.
You can't do it without water, or?
Well, there are dry washers which use air to forcibly separate the finer or the lighter material from the gold. So we have one that's out at the museum at Moz, and it's called a puffer because it puffs air to separate the
and the flakes of gold are heavier, so they're less likely to get puffed.
That's right. That's
got
correct. Yeah, we have filled that mission of Larry Polya that he put us on, and he wanted to show the hard rock mining all the way from the mine shaft. We built a mine shaft out there on flat ground. It looks a little bit hokey, but some people walk up to it and say, "Oh, how far in does this go?" Well, it only goes as far as the fence line, but at the same time, we put a little bend in it, so you can't tell whether it extends further than the bend. So it must be a little bit realistic. Then the ore cars take the gold ore to the grizzly, and we proceed to crush the gold ore and then remove the gold as it would have been 100 years ago from the crushed rock to using amalgamation, using mercury.
Yes. Chemical.
Yes, it's actually a bonding process, and it's today they're using a more more of a chemical process using cyanide, which is far more efficient.
Mm-hmm. And deadlier poison.
Yeah, although it's used in such minor dilutions or major dilutions to where I've seen it down in Randsburg when they recovered the tailings piles. They were actually shooting it through rainbird sprinklers on the heap bleach.
Oh, wow.
It couldn't be that bad an actor.
Well, Tropico, which is a mine down by Rosamond, we did a story about it, and in the processing plant, everywhere there were warnings about cyanide. There's cyanide is used in this, and it's a deadly poison. So that's why I thought it was not the best.
Well, it's not. No,
It is to
or is mercury.
Yeah, no, mercury. I remember the big fish scare with mercury. Remember that you and I are old enough to remember when they were warning you about mercury in the fish that were being, because of the gold rush.
Well, amalgamation back when it was in use in large quantities, on amalgamation tables, the pulp from the stamp mill flowed across the amalgamation table, and any particle of silver or gold that came in contact with the mercury that coated the table would stick to the mercury, and then, but it was only 70% effective, so 30% of the gold went out with some of the mercury back into the creek again.
Oh, okay.
And so the contamination was a natural process of amalgamating gold. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does to me. It sounds wasteful, but then you can go back and can you retrieve that 30% of gold still today, or?
Yep. Well, here's an example that there had been a book for sale in our gift shop. It's out of print today, Mammoth Gold, and the gold mining in Mammoth it was just not even 70% effective, and a fellow came in with 2 donkeys and worked the tailings piles in an arasta to pulverize that gold ore even further, and kept himself in. He grumstaked himself for more than a few years with those donkeys going around and around, dragging stones across the tailings that had been worked previously. Yeah, he was recovering lost gold.
We have an Arastra in the Alabama hills, but it was built for a movie. But people always ask, what is that? And I try to explain. You just did a better job. Usually takes me longer. And that part of the process.
We do have a working Arastra at Law.
Oh, you do?
Yes, we built one. Larry Poole, our mentor that gave me that phone call 16 years ago, he wanted the display to be totally static. And upon his passing, we changed that, and there are a lot of things that work.
Does the Arastra work?
Yes.
Who pulls the big rock that smashes the...
The kids love it.
Oh, they do it?
Yeah.
Well, they're kind of mule-like sometimes.
Well, my favorite term for the youngsters is jackanapes. And lo and behold, I thought that was just a Southern term that came out of the South with my dad during the Depression. But lo and behold, it means a wild child. And they love taking the Rasta around and around and grinding our quartz rock for us. And it's pretty authentic. We know of...
I haven't seen that. I'll have to go look at it because I am curious about it. So many problems.
That would
I'm
be,
not sure how you...
That's what you can't solve the problems. You have to solve the little things that possibly could. And the reason I'm talking about term limits is because that's the only thing we could do. If we get it so that everybody's on term limits, they all have a limited number of, say, 6 years that they can get their projects done, and they don't have to deal with people who've been in there 20 years that are running things. But everybody has to be on the 6-year schedule, so it's going to take time to make that happen. But it's going to take time.
How do you make it happen? How do you?
Well, it would have to be a resolution, and it would have to be voted on by the public that they would have to, it'd have to be, voted on to change the Constitution, the state or the government or the county. It's really it's very difficult.
County, but
very difficult.
Changing the Constitution is almost impossible.
Changing it requires, if we'd have to get everybody to vote for it, and that means everybody to vote for it. The most traumatizing thing that I have heard in the last 6 months was that 96% a legislation, doesn't matter what it is, a legislation passed with a 96% for it vote. So I did some research on that. I looked at that. It turns out that 1/2 of the people who were registered, not that are eligible to vote, but can I shut up? 1/2.
Are you recording this? Okay.
1/2 of the people who are registered to vote, not old enough to vote, but registered to vote, did not vote in that election. Of those people, and it was in a small county, of those people that showed up to vote, most of them had to register, which means they were that day. You can go in and register that day, and most of those people who registered. So it was probably a major decision was made based on what, maybe 1,500 people out of 30,000.
Is that a cultural thing, or is it a failure of education?
I think we have failed miserably in some areas. I don't think that people realize just how important their freedom is. They think that freedom means there's no responsibility. Actually, freedom is a high price, has a very high price. It means you are responsible for everything. Everything you say, everything you do. You're responsible. You can't look at Chris Langley and say, well, if he would have done so-and-so, if he hadn't done so-and-so, you wouldn't be in a position to ask the question, why did you do that? Did you ask that question? No, I didn't want to offend anybody. People are going to get offended, A very good, one of my instructors at the Chamber of Commerce academy that I attended for 4 years, they said, if somebody isn't mad at you, Kathleen, you're not doing a very good job. You need to get the people involved. It's scary. I think that's the biggest fear I have right now, is the fact that the American people, and I'm going to say just Inyo County people, because those are the people I can talk to, can't be bothered to show up and vote. And one of the excuses they use, oh my God, can you believe this? One of the excuses they use is they don't want to be called for jury duty. Now, what if their son or their daughter was accused of something he didn't do, and he went to court, and nobody wanted to help him? Because the judge has to make decisions based on the law. The only chance you've got to let people see who you are, and that these things happen, but they were coinky dinks of something else. The jury's the only people that can do that. They can say, yes, here are all the laws, and and we'll make the judgments on that, but we have these feelings that this kid is innocent. I want a jury on there. I don't want the judge to make the determination of how things work out, because he has no choices. The judge has no choices. The people need to pay attention.
know of these midterms that we just went through that both sides or all the different candidates were really working on turnout, and how sad that that's a challenge to get people to come and vote. I was thinking, and they were giving them rides, and they were making sure they remembered that day. And yeah,
Oh, it's terrible. And one of the things that happened is a friend of mine set up a table outside the chamber with voter registration. You register here, and people tormented him over that.
really,
Yes. What are you doing? Sucky.
I'm not quite sure how we got there. What was that? What did that? Oh, we're still doing this? Oh, okay. I mean, keep going. Okay, got it.
So that's something I don't know. I think that we have made it way too easy to register, which might be taking away the idea that it's worth something. It's like giving money to a kid that doesn't earn it. It's just, it means nothing, you know? And I don't know what the answer is. I have all of these.
Well, there's definitely a disconnect between democracy and what we are willing to do for it. However, also they love to complain, but they don't vote to change it. I've noticed that quite a bit.
Yeah, we are letting our responsibilities slip away and not recognizing that as they slip away, so does every ounce of freedom we're going to have. As we say, well, I'm not responsible for that. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Well, what can I do? Find out what to do. Find out what needs to be done. Ask the question. Well, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. Well, I'm busy. Well, yeah, okay.
Well, I guess hurting feelings, I'm sure it's not on a national level. It must be on the...
Oh, yes. No, that's what I say. If you were serving 6 years, you wouldn't mind if you hurted somebody's feelings to get what you needed to represent the people you're there for. You wouldn't care if you hurt their feelings. Why? Because you're not going to ask for that job back.
Well, autocrats are definitely on the march around the world, so we need to be constantly aware of what's happening.
Absolutely. And people say those are just words. You can't imagine how many people have to listen to me rave about this in the world. Everybody I talk to, if we start talking to anything that's important to me, this is where it goes. That there are reasons for thinking the way they do. I just want to slap them.
So you probably did this in the chamber office
every chance I got. If somebody came in and said, one of the things that I would do in the chamber office is somebody would come in and complain. I'd say, what are you going to do about it? Do you have an answer? And they'd say, well, I thought the chamber would do it. I said, no, that isn't what we do. You know, well, so-and-so didn't give me the right room, or one of the businesses gets complained about. They haven't got courage to go in and say, I got the wrong room. They just get mad and report it. And then they go on.
Is that it? Like a hotel?
Like a hotel, yeah. Or like a restaurant. Well, the service was lousy. I said, did you tell them? Well, no, I don't know them. You know them. You go tell them. Sometimes I did.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm sure you have much more to say.
Isn't this fun?
Hi, Eva. How are you?
Hi, Chris. I'm just fine.
We've been talking about all kinds of things before we began recording. So how about we start with the Salon and the Imagination Lab, which is now located in Lone Pine. How did it get to Lone Pine?
Okay, I had the Imagination Lab, which I always describe as a place for artistic experiments, and it was really a community center, but we did all kinds of things there. Because of the pandemic, it seemed like all the public things couldn't be done, so the lab sort of turned into a bookstore. I'm a writer and a poet. And
love books.
I love books.
Books always follow me home no matter what.
Total bibliophile. So anyway, it seemed like I needed to move the lab, close the lab because of that. And I was offered an honorary residency at the Metabolic Studio building in Lone Pine, which is this. I was offered this an honorary residency in that building where I could put the Imagination Lab, books and art and so forth, and have classes and public events as possible, depending on what's going on with the pandemic. And that was from Lauren Bond, who's part of the Annenberg family. And that's kind of how it all
And the
happened.
metabolic studio.
Yeah, and the metabolic
His
studio is hers.
functioning.
Yeah, right. And so I'm also, basically they're calling me the curator for the Gertrude Stein Salon. So it's interesting. Should I say where the salon
Yeah,
is for
absolutely.
people? Okay, so in Lone Pine, the market is right downtown, and just if you cross the street going north, there's a Subway sandwich shop, and then there's a little Lone Pine bistro, and then there is the saloon. I think it's called Jake's, and next to the saloon is the salon, okay, and the metabolic studio, and then next to and in the same building is next to the salon is the Imagination Lab. And then if you go farther at the corner, there's a store of Western goods. You know that because you've lived in Lone Pine for a long time. So I'm now...
Not any longer, though, by the way. Lloyd's is no longer there. It is an outgrowth of up here, the it's horses, horse food, dog food, and all that sort of stuff.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, that's where I'm located now, and I could talk a little bit about the Gertrude Stein Salon.
I think you should, because it's kind of odd. People are always surprised when they find this collection of modern art in the middle of a Western town.
They always want to know what was Lauren Bond thinking, and I've tried to figure it out myself, and I've heard from her and from people really close to her and so forth. Anyway, what it is to me is fascinating, and I knew about it before I got this residency and so forth. I had used it because I am a poet, and I knew who Gertrude Stein was. It's actually called the Salon de Fleurs because Gertrude Stein and her brother Leo had an apartment in Paris, and Gertrude Stein went there and moved in with her brother. They were very close friends from the time that they were little kids. I mean, extremely close. And she moved in with him in 1903, and she ended up being at that salon and living in Paris until 1938. And what happened is they were just collecting artworks, buying art, and all these artists who were unknown at the time started gathering at their house on Saturdays. So that became a salon for artists and writers and poets and sculptors, Picasso, and all the people that we know now as famous artists and writers and poets and so forth somehow showed up there, and because they were backed by Gertrude and her brother, that's a lot to do with why they are as famous as they are.
So it's a very interesting thing.
And the salon is a complete recreation of the salon in Paris 120 years ago. And on the walls are, well, it's not exactly copies, but Picasso's, Matisse's, Cézanne's. It's like really being there.
Yeah.
Back in Paris. It's a fascinating place. It's free to the public, and I have it open there on Fridays from 1 to 4 in the afternoon.
Thank you.
So if anybody wants to see it, they can come then. And it's also available for locals to use free for parties and gatherings. They just have to contact me about that. That's about tells it. It's beautiful, really.
Hi, Eva. You've been talking about the salon the last time we met.
Right.
And what it is, it's always a surprise to people who don't know it's there. And for a lot of people who live in Lone Pine even, they stumble upon it and go, what is this? So I know for one thing that you know about a lot of the artists and the writers in Owens Valley. That's sort of been always your focus, and we certainly are not going to go through all of them. And you are one of them as well. let's see. So you know Walter Hopps is buried in our cemetery in Lone Pine. Who was Walter Hopps?
Well, Walter Hopps, I think it's interesting. When I first became the curator down at the salon, I was told about Walter Hopps and that he was buried in the cemetery in Lone Pine, which fascinated me. It turns out that he's a very famous curator of museums, and he had his first gallery of artists when he was only 21 years old in Los Angeles. And he did it, you know, kind of with a dime, you know what I mean? He rented a space in an inexpensive area. He put up a curtain or did some kind of thing, broke it into two spaces, and he lived in the back of that with his first wife, I believe. And he became very famous. He became curator of the Pasadena Art Museum, some other places. He was the first one who showed Andy Warhol from the East Coast, and so he's a really important kind of guy.
He really started the artists. What would you call that?
Well, the
artist presence.
Yeah, that's
in
right.
Los Angeles.
Yeah, it really is right. And so, I thought at first that he just passed through and somehow thought Lone Pine was beautiful, like myself and so many other artists. But in fact, it turns out that his father, I think, either had property or always was going up to Mammoth. And so Walter had been through the Owens Valley quite a few times, and I think he was as struck with the beauty of it as so many of the artists here are.
The desert and the mountains. And
right.
I think he also fished with his father, and so I guess he grew to want to be buried in Lone Pine, and he got his wish.
A pretty amazing story, really.
So talk a little bit about the Imagination Lab, which was in Bishop, but now is located down there.
Right.
And what you hope to do with it.
Well, pretty much what I did with the Imagination Lab in Bishop, except that really when I contacted Lauren Bond and said, I really need a place to move this, but what I really want is a writing studio for myself too. And I remembered that there was a big room kind of behind the recreation of the studio of the salon. And I said that would be a great writing studio. Anyway, so I want to be able to have my own private place for writing studio. But I also, right now, for instance, I have up on the walls at the Imagination Lab the most beautiful wildlife photographs by a person new to the area. His name is Dana Hodgson, and they're fantastic.
I love
really.
this coyote picture.
Yeah,
I'm
I
a
was just
big
going to say
coyote
that.
fan.
That's what I was going to mention. This one picture of two little baby coyotes. It's like their fledgling year or something, and they're in a puddle or at the edge of a lake or something, and it's just such a beautiful piece. And one of the artists that I showed, one of the last artists I showed at the Imagination Lab in Bishop, I have her portfolio, what's left over. She's gone. She's died about 20 years ago. And I want to show her work again, too. Her name is Lorna Yarbrough. So probably her work will go up after Dana's comes down. His will be up until the end of February.
Okay.
This little piece here, an abstract, this is by my husband. And right now I have a lot of the pieces of different artists that I've shown in the last 20 or 22 years at three different venues, actually. There's the Imagination Lab in Bishop. Then I had Pegasus Gallery, which was in an old kind of Western building right across from the lumber company on the south end of Lone Pine. And then where there's right on the corner of Lagoon and 395, I had Pegasus Gallery there. I showed many, many artists. We had classes there, we had poetry readings there, we had music events there, and all those things are the kind of things that I want to do in the lab in Lone Pine.